Hi, welcome to Makers Bar. I'm Akshita Shetty. Today we have Shashank Randev from 100x VC. 100x is the biggest early stage accelerator in India. 100x believes that entrepreneurs have the capacity to accomplish audacious dreams. They are on a singular mission to help founders scale, grow, and succeed. Welcome, Shashank. I'm really excited to have you.
Thank you, Akshata, and an absolute pleasure being here.
Yeah. So, Shashank, I've heard so much about 100x, right? And I keep looking at all your early stage investments as well. And I've seen you guys throughout, right? And you guys have really done a phenomenal job. And I have to say, I'm really excited to have you here and talk to you about your journey and how you got started, right? So, tell me, Shashank, I know very little about your early career. So, tell me what was your early career like, and how did you begin doing what you're doing? Because it doesn't like one day somebody gets up and say, I'm going to start this accelerator. It's going to be one of the biggest accelerators in India, right? So
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so we are just for we are working as a fund. The only difference is we are doing a large set of companies, and hence
Mhm.
the structure seems like an accelerator. But it didn't. We the journey was quite non-linear for us, and
Yeah.
particularly for me. So I'm an electronics and telecommunication engineer
Uh-huh.
by education, not by profession. I did work with a few organizations like NIIT Limited and Zensar Technologies um, before landing up in an MBA program. I
Uh-huh.
completed my MBA program, and then in 2009, it just so happened that I just got an opportunity to move back to Bombay with a
Uh-huh.
startup without thinking too much about a startup concept, and I became the founding member. And that
Uh-huh.
startup happened to be in the space of the venture capital and private equity space, where we were building a SaaS platform,
Okay.
secondary research platform for the VC and private equity funds way back in 2009 for India. So it was a beginning point of that
Yeah.
industry taking
Yeah.
shape in India.
Yeah.
And we happen to be the first and foremost players in
Uh-huh.
providing the research. And second, we were a startup. So by 2015, I had a very unique vantage point of what was happening.
Okay.
Um, and this was the first phase of the VCP funding. And
Yeah.
2015, we got acquired by News Corporation, the holding company in New York.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that journey was very interesting for me because I was working for a startup. I was building a product which was for the private equity VC industry, and
Yeah.
we got acquired. That whole journey gave me a very broader understanding of what was happening in India, and I was just lucky to be in that spot. And because I'd done that, I think when I moved out, we I wanted to kind of enter the investment game, and
Yeah.
again was fortunate enough to I joined a San Jose based accelerator which was planning
Uh-huh.
to set up in India. We incubated 70 companies. We invested in 16. I moved out in 2018, started doing angel investments, but wanted to be part of a fund structure. And that's
Yeah.
where I bumped into my friend and mentor, Sanjay, who I'd known for
Uh-huh.
almost a decade. And he had the
Uh-huh.
vision of doing something very similar, like
Yeah.
YC in India, and that resonated with me.
Yeah.
We joined hands, and we had Ninad and Yagnesh come in. And how it is structured, it's a SEBI registered category 1 fund. The only difference is uh, we are acting as the first check. We deploy the capital in early stage companies first. We then work with them, and
Mm-hmm.
then announce these companies at a VC pitch day, and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully we've been able to kind of increase the ability to raise the balance
Capital.
round.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now today I think we stand at a large set of portfolio companies which are growing, and hoping to kind of continue this and showcase companies coming out of our portfolio company which are growing and going to a series B or series C kind of a structure.
Yeah, yeah, you guys have done a phenomenal job, actually. Extremely. Like, I'm very impressed. And I
Thank you.
have seen from the batch one, right, all the startups. So
Correct.
I have basically now like the batches that are coming are like amazing, I would say. Like really
Thank you.
good. Yeah, so I mean, I'm super impressed. So tell me, obviously, like News Corp is a big corporation, Super Murdochs, and like someone like them buying you, that was amazing, right? It is actually a really good vantage point for you, and a company which is dealing with VC research at in 2009. I mean, I think there was barely any VC. I think there was Sequoia there, then still,
No,
but
I mean, Sequoia was a fund, but nobody was providing research. They used to
yeah,
be
yeah,
like a Bloomberg, or a we had uh, there was another player called Venture Intelligence, which still
yeah,
exists,
yeah,
and
yeah.
but
Venture
nobody. And
intelligence.
today we've got Traction, which is now gone to an IPO. But
Yeah,
nobody was providing research data
yeah,
to the VCP industry, right? And I think from that perspective, when we got acquired in 2015 by News Corp, we were the only player which had reached that point. The company was VCCH, VC Circle, and I think now it is owned by HT Media. But yeah, that was a very unique vantage point which I had.
actually, I think I've heard of VC Circle as well.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I would say that. So tell me, as you built 100x, right? What was the significant challenges that you faced? I'm sure like a lot of challenges that you faced, right? And in the initial stages of the business, how did you go about convincing people, hey, we can build this? I mean, and don't get me wrong, it totally resonates when you say, I want to build YC of India, right? It totally resonates with a lot of people and probably a lot of investors as well. But what was it? I'm sure you still had a lot of challenges building all of this and getting your batches ready and doing, I mean, getting your operations and everything going, right?
Yeah. So I think the biggest challenge was identifying entrepreneurs whom we could fund, and then from there ensure that
Yeah,
when we've deployed capital in them, and then we are announcing them at the VC pitch deck, which
yeah,
is roughly 120 days. The output for us is their ability to raise at that particular
yeah,
junction, and we might be coming in on hope, but the other follow-on investor will come in on a metric, right? So how do you do that at a volume when you're working with a SaaS company and a D2C company and
yeah,
so on and so forth, right? And I think getting around that mindset,
yeah.
creating a process around that, I think I would say not challenging, but I think
Mhm.
forced us to kind of think through this not as a typical VC, which is a large VC doing 5 6 investments, but treating
Yeah,
this at a volume game and understanding what are the things required in terms of processes, in terms of monitoring these companies, in terms of
yeah,
giving and providing them meaningful network so that they can kind of
yeah,
have paid POCs or opportunities to partner, which gets them to that X metric. And I think figuring that piece out,
yeah,
I think was a great insight. Wasn't a challenge per se, but I think those were the first 2 3 classes which helped us understand that there are certain metrics which are going to be looked on by the follow-on investors. I think today we can
yeah,
say that after doing 127 investments, uh,
yeah,
and having invested cumulative 9 million USD in our portfolio companies, they've
yeah,
gone ahead and raised 70 million USD as the follow-on capital from our VC pitch days, out of which
yeah,
70% came through growth stage venture capitals like Sequoia, Lightspeed,
yeah,
uh, and 10% of these companies are at Series A right now, with
yeah,
5% going to Series B, right? So I think just creating this process,
yeah,
I think, and just being at it. I think the challenging part is like do you get
yeah,
bored? Do you not get bored? Do you because it's a process. One thing ends and then you start again, right? the
yeah,
the
yeah,
the light at the end of the tunnel for a business like us is maybe
yeah.
5 6 7 years down the line when the companies are
Yeah,
really
even
growing.
8 times. Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
still haven't
Totally.
taken an exit.
Yeah,
So just getting up every morning and saying, okay, let's do this again. I think that piece, and then cracking the whole
yeah,
process was a little challenging.
yeah,
But again, all of us were motivated. We knew what we wanted to do in terms of the fund structure. We
yeah,
knew this is the only fund structure we want to follow. We do not want to get into follow-on funding. We do not
yeah,
want to get into pre-series A. We want to be the first
yeah,
seed check writer. And I think that kind of we kept building on
yeah.
that.
I think that's a very interesting strategy as well, right? Because you are very clear with your strategy where you want to be, and you're saying that okay, we are not going to do this, and we'll do this the best, and that's what I mean, at a VC has to pick their stage and say that this is what we're going to do, and we're going to continue doing this, right? So yeah, I the first time like I saw you guys, I was like, oh, thank God these guys are there to do all of that what I want, right, for my investments. I was so happy to see your firm. So okay, so tell me, what has been like the most satisfying moment for you in your business? And I know 127 companies is not a joke. So what is the most satisfying I mean moment for you personally?
I think we've had many of those because there are a lot of these companies which we invest in. I'll just pick up one sector: deep technology, deep tech. Right, deep technology is usually a function of a lot of R&D, and very few companies make it
Yeah,
to commercialization. Right, so one of the sectors we focus on
yeah,
is deep tech, and
yeah,
the moment of happiness and the moment of satisfaction comes when you've invested in an opportunity which is still in the
yeah,
R&D. You think it has potential to commercialize, and then after funding, following certain processes
yeah,
and steps and getting them a few validations through other business opportunities, seeing
yeah,
them commercialize and then scale and then raise another round. I
yeah,
think that process has been very, very satisfying for us.
yeah,
We've seen, despite going through the COVID cycle,
yeah,
we've seen companies survive and consistently be at it,
yeah,
and I think that process has been quite satisfying for us, and particularly in the
yeah,
deep technology space where India is still emerging.
yeah,
And we've seen companies, and this is globally, right? Deep technology
yeah.
companies do take significant
Lot.
time to commercialize, and I think that change, a positive
Yeah.
change, is being seen in India, and some of our portfolio companies are kind of moving to that stage. So
Yeah.
that's been a very, very satisfying piece for us.
So that's interesting. We just spoke about how my partner is in deep technology and he doesn't want to move to India.
Yes.
And this is really interesting, right? And I totally hear you when you say deep tech, you need to have like really deep pockets even to commercialize it and go there. And that definitely I feel is very satisfying if you see where you're funded at an early stage and then you're seeing that they're raising a second round and they have some commercial value. That's amazing. I would say that's awesome. I would want to know the name of the company offline for sure.
Yeah.
So what are the like tell me like obviously VC is a very there's some amount of risk in the business, right? And that's in any business, but you have to obviously think about, I mean, you have to think about the values that you have and how do you evaluate risk within your business, right? I mean, I think that's like a big factor within this business. And how do you like think about it, or as you're thinking about your business, right?
I mean, this is a risky business, and I think the seed
Yeah,
stage investment is the most riskiest because you're wanting
yeah,
to back companies and founders who've just moved out of an ideation stage and just come up with a raw product, right?
yeah,
But I think this is where you test the mettle of the team coming in, which is 100x, where we fundamentally believe that through our network, through our years of experience, if you're able to kind of take them from 0 to 1, which is
yeah,
what India is at right now, which is what India requires in terms of very multiple entrepreneurs coming in via incubation centers, via accelerators, right? So the highest risk is that these companies will fail, right?
yeah,
And to mitigate that risk is why we are doing 100, right? Because
yeah,
and we are increasing the probability of success, right?
yeah,
And obviously, there are chances that if you invest in 100 companies a year,
yeah,
maybe all of them will succeed. But let's say the highest risk is that 90 of them fail. You still hit upon the 10, and the 10 could have the potential of becoming unicorns, right? And from a
hmm,
business standpoint, it returns the entire fund structure. But also, I think on a holistic level, I think the idea is to give capital to entrepreneurs to at least try, right? So
yeah,
100 entrepreneurs now have been given capital to kind of build out something, and thereby we are increasing our probability of success, and thereby saying that if the 90 businesses also succeed, you're still expecting a 20x to a 50x kind of a return, right? So either way, while it's the riskiest, but if you diversify and do 100 set of investment, which is what we want to do, 100 each year. I mean, just
yeah,
this year we did 47. I
yeah,
think that's how we mitigate the risk, right?
yeah, yeah. So I have one question, which is like when you're investing in these companies, they are all purely registered everything in India, all of these companies, or they could be registered in Singapore or something like that as well. This is for
No,
the
so
audience.
we are an India focused fund.
Yeah,
We identify with the opportunities in India.
yeah,
We and hence all these companies are Indian holding companies based out of
mhm.
India, registered in India. We are
Got it.
not investing in Singapore holding companies or Delaware registered companies.
Yeah,
Many of our portfolios, after we've investing in them, and then they having raised subsequent rounds from follow-on investors or VCs, do end up then shifting to Delaware or Singapore for whatever reasons.
yeah,
But we as a fund isn't, we are an India focused fund, and we will continue to invest in Indian holding companies.
got it. Okay, so tell me, I'm sure you've had a long career, right? And after your MBA, you went and worked for a small startup, then you worked for another angel group. You've invested in 70 companies before you actually started 100x, right? So I'm sure during this whole time, because this is not an easy business, it's a tough business. Because you make mistakes, you're sitting and thinking, oh God, I've lost my money here, right? But I mean, your money or your investors' money, it doesn't matter, right? It's the same. I get the same that the
The
thing on your
responsibility is
tummy,
the same.
yeah, the
Yeah.
knot in your tummy, when you lose people's money. So I'm sure you've had adversity and doubt during these times, and how do you kind of handle that?
Y- you know, uh, that doubt has always been there since the time I possibly started my journey as a startup founder, right?
Uh-huh.
But I think those doubts will always be there, and
Yeah.
I think that becomes second nature. But I think the primary fact is that if something doesn't excite you, if the whole uncertainty and the ability to kind of create something out of that uncertainty, if you don't treat it like an adventure,
Mhm.
this can be a very, very you know tough business to do, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's not predictable. You need to carve out
Yes.
that path to create the path of profitability and predictability, right? But if you're comfortable with that kind of a you know environment where you want to kind of build it out from grounds up, not having structures in place, I think that mindset is very, very important. Uh, and I think for me, I think I've always enjoyed
Yeah.
that journey.
I totally hear you. As you have done 100x, and I read somewhere where you guys have done completely, like it was all organic, like how you guys have grown, right? So
Yes.
I think it was Ninad who put that post up, and I don't remember anymore. He said, or he said it in one of the pitches where he said, "Oh, it was all organic." So tell me, like, what your leadership style has been, right? Because to grow something like this organically, you need to have some form of you need high leadership, I would say. So, what is your leadership style?
I think if that question is directly for me, then my personal, I mean, we've been able to see as a team, we've come together, right? Everybody
Yeah,
has their own unique vantage point.
yeah,
Sanjay has done 150 investments in his personal capacity, and that network
yeah,
and having built out unicorns from his existing
yeah,
angel portfolio has obviously given us a huge vantage point.
yeah,
And with Ninad coming in with his corporate experience, Jagnesh, myself, and Vatsal, I think all of us coming together has kind of, opened up networks. And that's why it's been very organic for us. So even in terms of
yeah,
deal flow, um, and but that being said, eh, we appreciate the stage we are at, right?
yeah,
And India is different. India is still evolving, right? So there are a
yeah,
couple of leadership styles which we do, which essentially builds out the pipeline, the culture for us. And I'll mention two or three.
yeah,
One is founders dating, which is what we do for early stage companies who have single founders
yeah.
and they want to meet co-founders, right? So we bring these guys together,
Mhm.
and the whole idea is that can we do this in a non-for-profit initiative kind of a structure. We have a Gurukul session, which is a 12-week program for providing skill sets to applying to a VC fund, right?
Yeah,
So a lot of fun. I'm saying this because we've reviewed 26,000 businesses over the last 4 years and invested in 127, and
yeah,
doesn't mean that the balance were not good.
yeah,
They were just not ready, right? So providing that skill sets. And the third most critical, I think, is our analyst trainee program, where
yeah,
had 40 analysts come through our 6 month program. They get to work with the partner team, part of the investment committee calls, part
Yeah.
of evaluation, part of deal sourcing, part of post due diligence, and all
Mhm.
of these guys have gotten placed
Yeah.
in other VCs, right? And they're all visible on our website, right? So
Yeah.
I think our objective is to keep it very flat
Yeah.
and keep it very porous, because we provide necessary skill sets outside so the founders can be ready to apply to us to get funded. Also, the folks we utilize within our structure should be equipped enough that they given 6 months of
Yeah.
their time and they're eligible to kind of move out and join other funds, right?
Yeah.
And I think these are some of the things which we are trying to do, whether it's leadership or not. I think it's just a function of where we are at,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and that's how we're trying to build it up right now.
And I love the usage of the word porous because I've never seen anybody use that term, in describing their leadership style, I would say.
Yeah.
I love it. So okay, so tell me, how has this business evolved in India ever since you have started? And you described a little bit briefly about it, but like, what do you think has changed? Because it is, you won't believe it. My son goes to extra classes, and he has a Korean teacher, and she was telling me, "Oh, Akshita, India is like a big story now," and I'm like, "Oh, you also know this. This is kind of interesting." So the business has evolved, and the Indian story is changing, right? And I'm sure you've seen the days when it was not so, right? So how do you perceive that, and what according to you has been the biggest massive shift now?
So let me understand. So shift as in the cultural shift which has happened. Sorry, I missed the
I mean,
question.
since you started in this business, how has this business evolved, the venture business evolved,
Understood.
according to you?
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's evolved many folds, Akshata, because in 2008 and 9, you were seeing the evolution of private equity funds, the
Yeah.
evolution of late stage companies. There was no um, early stage funds or micro VC funds or the concept on
Yeah.
those lines. And I
Yeah.
think uh, now, the last 4 years, you see a significant emergence of early stage funds, micro VC funds, and all homegrown. So a lot of domestic capital which has come in. And I
Yeah.
think from a pyramid structure, I think all stages are being covered, with 100x being at the bottom as a
Yeah.
discovery fund. You've got micro VC funds, then you've got the Axels and the Sequoias in terms of growth stage, and then you've
Yeah.
got the private equity funds and the hedge funds, right?
Yeah.
And we are moving into the next phase of evolution, so to speak, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And across sectors, now you've gotten funds where there some of them are deep tech focused, some of them are consumer
Yeah.
tech focused, some of them are D2C brand focused,
Yeah.
only focused on one sector.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the biggest shift over the
Yeah.
last 10 years, which is a sign of maturity,
Yeah.
which is a sign of maturity
Yeah.
of the ecosystem.
Yeah, and I don't know if you remember when the first time we met, I had spoken about, like, I recently saw SME IPOs as well, coming
Hmm.
into the landscape, and I was like, wow, this definitely, like, the landscape is completely changing versus when I used to see companies 5 years ago versus now, right? So I think this system, I mean, the ecosystem is changing, as well as the whole entire landscape, as you put it, right, is changing, and there is a huge focus on the whole India story, and people are looking at it even externally as well. So tell me, is there? I mean, you don't have. I mean, you don't have. I mean, people don't have such careers unless they've had some massive, like, good mentors, or some, massive shifts for some reason, right? And they are like thinking in this direction, because this kind of thinking is probably a 1 or 2% thinking, what the thinking that you have, right? So the question is, like, what did you have, like, have mentors? Did you have a book that you read which kind of changed you? And you did mention that Sanjay was a mentor, but what else was,
No,
I'm curious.
actually, I've been very fortunate because I've had mentors in some capacity or the other, and I think that kind
Yeah.
of pushed me. First one was my father,
Yeah.
who was in the Ministry of External Affairs, and he come
Uh-huh.
from a government services background.
Uh-huh.
So he kept imbibing the concept, keep pushing hard. He didn't understand businesses because he was a
Yeah.
government officer, but he
Okay.
kept saying, keep building out. So I think that as a family, that kept on, you know, that sentiment kind of kept me going. I think the second significant mentor who I had in my life was my uncle, my mama, so to speak,
Yeah.
who helped me understand this. I worked briefly with him in a company called MTZ Polyfilms, which was
Yeah.
in the space of manufacturing polyfilms, right? So, um, and then I had a few folks who guided me through the MBA initiative. Every job I went to, NITs and sir, I always had one individual who kept on kind of helping me out, which
Yeah.
helped me shift gears, right? So
Yeah.
no one person in particular, and I continue to get mentored. I have the
Yeah.
privilege of having even now being mentored by Nina, the Agnesh and Sanjay, right? Because they still
So
have
pass them on to me.
I think I've been fortunate and lucky that I've had
Yeah.
somebody to guide me through that process,
Yeah.
and just nudge me in that direction. Okay, fine, just keep pushing forward, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think, as I said, very non-linear, organic, wasn't planned.
Yeah.
One thing kept building up. I had not envisioned that startup would lead to funding. It
Yeah.
just happened. You just took one decision which felt ambitious and adventurous at that moment, and that's
Yeah.
how it started. And I think it worked out
Yeah.
with some hard work. And I think I was just fortunate to have, and I
Yeah.
continue to be fortunate of having the mentor support.
That's amazing. Actually, like when I look back, right, even my career was all accidental. And sometimes when I tell people about my entire career, they are shocked because they're like, "How did like you get these opportunities?" It just fell on my lap. It was not because I seek them. It was just I was right there at the. I mean, I seek some things. I broke some glass
Something,
ceilings.
correct.
Yeah, but then with some of them like just fell on my lap, like
Correct.
literally.
And then you decided to act on that, right? And
Yeah,
I
and
think
then I
that's
decided to act on
that's
it.
that's the most important thing. Correct.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's amazing. And then so tell me now, now I mean, you guys are 100x VC. You're seeing so many entrepreneurs, right? And you're probably seeing every day a dozen of them. So what is the most critical skill that an entrepreneur should have? And so and tell me what is an advice that you would give if somebody wants to do entrepreneurship?
We talk to entrepreneurs a lot. The one thing which we tell them is don't come into this if you think it's cool.
Yeah,
It's not.
yeah,
Uh, is if you think it's going to be peaceful, it's not.
yeah,
It's a struggle. It's a fight. And if you don't have that mindset, warrior mindset, or
yeah,
survival, or I would say, I've said this to many folks. If you don't like trekking, the uncertainty
yeah,
and figuring out your path, maybe you should not get into it. It's the uncertainty, is the need, is the craving to create a certain path for yourself, right?
yeah,
And Sanjay, as Sanjay says it, entrepreneurship is like jumping off a cliff,
yeah,
and then on your way down,
yeah,
uh, building a plane with
yeah,
whatever
yeah.
you have and
I
surviving,
think Steve
right?
often said this.
Right.
Steve often said this. Yeah,
And so it's a vivid description, right? And this is how entrepreneurship is, right? You'll be
yeah,
it's not going to be comfortable because you're creating something from scratch.
yeah, yeah. I
And
totally.
and it's a difficult process, and you
Yeah,
need to have that mindset. The glory comes much later,
yeah,
much later. And
yeah,
if you fundamentally believe that you've identified a big problem, then
yeah,
it's totally worth it, which I believe in India, there's a great opportunity. So if you've
yeah,
got that mindset, then there are multiple problems to be solved, and
yeah,
solutions which are very large, opportunistic, right? So
yeah,
it's a great time to build in India.
yeah,
But before you do that, the mindset of that it's not only about function of long hours. I'll give you a very simple example, Akshita. A lot of founders sometimes think, now that I've started, A, I need an executive assistant to schedule my meetings.
yeah,
B, I'm a product person, I can't do sales. What they forget is that an
yeah,
entrepreneur needs to schedule calls, clean the toilet,
yeah,
and sometimes open the shop and shut the shop, and then do all of that. That
yeah,
mindset, right,
yeah,
needs to be there. Pick up the phone and make sales, right?
yeah.
And if you're not that driven, then you can't, you won't be able to survive.
So it's funny you talk about cleaning toilets. So one of my good friends, I name him. His name is Vikram Bharti. I went to business school with him, and he started this company called a hostel. It was this concept of hostels across Asia, and I don't know if you know him. So, and he eventually sold it to I think. I forgot the VC's name, and he eventually sold the company. And I went to Singapore to meet him, and then he told me, Akshita, I in the very first year, and this guy has been a banker at JP Morgan Chase, and like he had this full fledged career. And he's like, first year I was actually cleaning the toilets of my of my hostel, and
Yeah.
I said, why, Vikram, why are you
Yeah.
doing this? And he's like, that is what it is. And eventually, like 1 year from then, he sold it for a few $1 million, and he's happy doing what he's doing, and he's going to be an entrepreneur for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
But yeah, he literally had to clean his toilets.
Yeah.
So, anyways, so it was great chatting with you, Shashank, and thank you for giving this time. And I really, really enjoyed talking to you and learning more about 100x VC and learning about your journey. And I would say it was a great pleasure interviewing you.
Thank you, Akshita, and thank you for having me.
Yeah.